Hello, everyone. This video, I'm going to help you further develop your research project in NRS 324 mammalogy. So what we will be doing in the class is working in groups to investigate the effect of something on rodent small mammal diversity. They're mostly rodents. Go to project guidelines. Everything is described here, including all the sort of the background on generally what the kinds of questions you're asking. Everybody in the class now has started narrowing in on a particular question or particular factor they're looking at the effect of on. What I want to do here is help you narrow that down further, especially with regard to how literature search goes. So when you go to whatever question you're looking at, like for example, if you were interested in the effect of edge on rodent diversity, or roads on rodent diversity, or something about forest canopy or vegetation density, or something about soils, maybe the age of the forest, whatever it is, when you go into the literature to see what's been done, you're probably not going to find much, if anything, on that specific topic. Sometimes you will, but typically you won't. So for example, if you were interested in the effect of coarse woody debris on rodent diversity, if you were to go and do a search, so what I mean by coarse woody debris, what am I talking about? I mean, basically this is just downed rotting logs and sticks that are laying on the ground. This represents example of habitat heterogeneity. And if you were to look up, if you were to do a search under Google Scholar, which we can do here, go to Google Scholar and go coarse woody debris, and you can see coarse woody debris, rodent diversity. If I use those keywords, what comes up? Rodent population community responses to experimental large-scale long-term coarse woody debris manipulations. If you look down here, you see vertebrate diversity, coarse woody debris, and not a lot else, although here's a response of white-footed mice to coarse woody debris and microhabitat use in the southern Appalachian tree fall gaps. So this happens to be a topic, a factor which has been studied, including with regard to rodent diversity, not just mammal diversity or just ecological diversity. So if this was your topic, you'd have quite a bit of literature to draw on, and you could get down and you'd have various examples of specific studies where somebody looked at coarse woody debris and looked at the effects on rodents or other mammals. But even then, the specifics are going to be much different than what you actually look at. But that would be like a kind of a best case scenario as far as ease of finding literature that's relevant to you. However, if you were to choose something else, and in this class, I want to you'll be able to choose whatever you want, basically, as long as you can do it, because you can always do the project. You just need to be able to frame the project when you go to write a proposal, just to give the reader and the audience a reason to think that this is an interesting question or a potentially important question. Basically the question is, why are you doing this? What's the potential importance? What's the relevance of this? So for example, nobody chose this, but someone did actually one year recently with a different project in a different class, is the effect of greenbrier density on something, we'll just say the ecological effects of greenbrier density. So greenbrier, smilax, forest, if you just look at here's just the pictures of it. It is a very common vine, thorny vine in New England and all throughout the eastern United States. And it sure seems like it would have some pretty strong effects on mammals, including rodents. You would think so. It actually produces fruits. It's an edible plant for a lot of species like deer, white-tailed deer. So I would think it would have some ecological importance. Let's see what happens when I go into Google Scholar and search for, we'll just say, smilax. So greenbrier, smilax, ecological. So I'll be just kind of broad there. I'm not even going to say rodent yet. We can go ahead and do that. greenbrier smilax rodent. Well, what comes up here is this one study here of the golden mouse and the Great Smokies and the Appalachians. And you just read part of it here. So somehow the predominant understory plant was greenbrier. So you have something there to work with, but it was really a study focused on one particular species of mouse, which is not found here. And that paper study was quite a while ago. And if you look back through here, it just seems like the only thing in there, the only thing, it's one species is the only literature you have to draw from. But it might be enough of a context to be able to, to focus your study. But there's not much there. What you're really interested in is rodent diversity. So if you instead, so now what you're going to do is you're going to broaden your search. So if you can't find much, start broadening your search, like just say ecological. Greenbrier smilax ecological. Just looking at the ecological effects, importance of greenbrier. And what you'll find is there's very little. I know this from experience with student projects. It's just amazing how little there is on this. And I find this very surprising because, in some places in Rhode Island, the vegetation is almost nothing but greenbrier and you can't get through it. Birds actually get caught in it and stuck. Like red-shouldered hawks have been rescued from greenbrier. Supposedly it's a native species, but the vine, but I'm not sure about that. It definitely is an indicator of disturbed landscapes. What you see here is basically nothing. You'll find there's just nothing. There's nothing on the ecological effects of greenbrier. Here's a study here. Basically, you're probably going to find that smilax tends to be in areas that don't get that either get burned or don't get burned. So in a case like, what do you do in a case like this where there's just, you're looking, your question of the effects of the thing you're looking at on rodent diversity, there's just nothing. Well, you want to branch out a little further and think of, well, smilax is a type of vegetation. So, vegetation, it's thorny. So vegetation, thorny ecological habitat. Thorn scrub comes up, but that's a type of shrub. It's not really all that relevant. I'm getting in here. There's actually, I just chose one here which there's not much out there. There actually is a paper where they looked at the effect of thorny vegetation on predation risk and bird nests. But that, again, that doesn't really relate much to the question you're asking. So you may eventually run into a wall, but you just can't find anything on the effect of, the factor you're looking at that relates to rodent diversity. So what do you do? Well, here's what you do. I suggest what you could do is just focus on Peromyscus, because that's mostly what we're gonna find. When you look at your track stations and you pull them out, you're gonna have multiple species on their tracks. Well, you might have none. You might have just a few tracks, which are probably going to be Peromyscus, and you can actually distinguish those. Or you might have two species, but rarely are you able to distinguish three species. But most likely what you're going to get is Peromyscus leucopus, because that's mostly what we have here. So you could just focus your study on Peromyscus leucopus. And in fact, what you could do is just ask the question, what is the effect of this factor on the probability of Peromyscus leaving tracks there? In other words, what's the effect of this factor on the abundance of Peromyscus? You're not measuring abundance of Peromyscus in any way. You're really in any direct way. You're just putting track stations out, checking them the next day, and seeing whether they're there or not. That doesn't tell you anything about abundance. However, if Peromyscus is more abundant in an area, then you expect a higher chance of getting tracks from that. Okay, that's how you deal with that. So yes, you are looking at the effect of abundance. You can look at the effect of abundance. The effect on abundance of Peromyscus, just focus on Peromyscus. And now you're just interested in, I'm interested in the micro habitat selection by Peromyscus leucopus, this really important species. It's important, it's kind of notorious in some ways, but it's, it's just ecologically a very significant mammal. And so just framing your study from just micro habitat selection by Peromyscus, that would be fine as well. And for that, there is a paper, which I'll make available here, that's this nice kind of There are other papers that have just looked at habitat selection by Peromyscus. This is one of them here, is one of the most detailed of those, and probably one of the most helpful. This is looking at vegetation structure and edge habitat. So there's a lot about habitat that's not looked at here, but this, quite a bit is. And this paper is just a good one to look at and peruse and get ideas. And you might end up actually citing this specifically or using it really directly in your study to design your study. It might relate pretty much directly, or it might relate indirectly. But in any case, you could always, so for example, Smilax, if you were doing that study, you could look at the effect of Smilax on rodent, on probability of Peromyscus being there. What I would do personally there is thinking, I remember trying to walk through, we all know what it's like to try to walk through Smilax. I tend to avoid it. I bet foxes tend to avoid it and coyotes tend to avoid it. But I would think that maybe Smilax might be a place where there's a higher probability of finding Peromyscus. That's a pretty reasonable explanation. So you might find that paper associating Smilax with predation risk. I couldn't find it when I just did a search there, but you could probably find that one. Anyway, do you see how first of all, if you can't find a paper on the specific question you're looking at, branch out more broader, look at other effects on other species, not just small rodents. And then if that doesn't work, look at just ecological effects. What are the ecological effects of the factor you're looking at? What's been found? And if that doesn't work, then you could always turn it around and just focus on Peromyscus and microhabitat selection to Peromyscus. It's thought to be a generalist species. That is, it's just kind of found everywhere. But not like every detail, like every possible habitat type has ever been looked at for Peromyscus, right? We can say they're generalist, but how do we know that they might not prefer a particular microhabitat, like ephemeral ponds, for example, or maybe they avoid ephemeral ponds? How about it relate to fern cover or canopy cover? We probably don't know. I would say I'll just end by saying that they're ecologically significant species, and so learning more about their habitat preferences would just be generally important. Okay, but you still want to frame your study in the fact that we looked at the effect of X on Y, but then the reader needs to understand why you did that and why that might be important, interesting, or relevant. So I hope this will help you get started. Start digging in. As you start digging into the literature, your ideas are going to probably evolve. And what I want you to do is by the time of our lab on Friday, I want you to have emailed me 3 references that are relevant to your study, and then a statement below each of those references telling me how they're relevant. So I'm going to send the link of this video, which you have if you're watching this, and along with the instructions which I just gave.